Good morning, my friends. Peace be with you all. Pax vobiscum, perhaps even assalamu alaikum. So I want to continue with the history of religious ideas, and I am building a foundation that will hopefully serve for my own beliefs, something that I might find worthy to believe in. And I'm going off of the work of EJ Michael Witzel, his Origins of the Worlds Mythologies, where he tries to trace back through a comparative and historical approach what the earliest beliefs of humanity were. And today I want to focus on creation. Now, if you watched any of the other videos, you might notice that some of the most archaic beliefs about creation actually don't touch upon the creation of the material world. It's sort of assumed to be pre-existent. Things simply are. The land, the ocean, the sky are already there. And what creation entails is making the world habitable for human beings. Now, we spoke of the high God. That appears to have been the universal belief, and most likely the earliest belief of humanity, that there was a high God that inhabited heaven. But that high God was not in any kind of relationship to his creation. He is a deus odiosus, or an idol god, a distant god. He may have been involved indirectly with creation, and then he receded into heaven and is no longer worshipped. People are just aware of his existence. Instead, the focus is on the intermediary beings, the demiurge and the tricksters, the quote, sons of God. So the demiurge, or the one created by God, the intermediary, is the one that actually creates or fashions the world and makes human beings. And that's an important distinction from many contemporary religions. Although Christianity does seem to retain some of this, since the Creator is the Son of God, or Jesus Christ. The Logos of God is the one who through all things were created. So there is a certain retention in the Christian faith. So when it comes to creation, the main view appears to be that the world was basically a world ocean around livable land. And this is something that was believed even by landlocked peoples like the medieval Mongols and the Bronze Age Indians. And there does appear to be a motif that is very archaic of a stepwise creation, or a trial creation, where the demiurge created human beings, but because of a fault they were destroyed. This is very common. This is also retained in the biblical account. So, for example, right before the Great Flood, mentioned in Genesis, you have God lamenting that he created human beings. That lament is an indication that a mistake was made. Obviously an anthropomorphism, but also an archaic artifact in the biblical account. Now, when it comes to the creation of humans, interestingly enough, Witzel seems to believe that the most archaic motif is that humans were created from a tree. This is very common in the Andaman Islands, Central Africa, and Australia. In Australia, at least some of the Aborigines would actually, bury their dead in the bosom of a tree. Some of their rituals hearkened to this myth of an origin from a tree. But equally archaic was the alternative of human beings created from clay or mud. And what's interesting is that Witzel points out that sometimes this motif exists alongside the tree motif. So in these same areas, for example, Africa and the Andaman Islands, you will find people who believe that humans were made from clay. Now keep in mind that these are isolated regions of the world. If you look into the Andaman Islands, the Southeast Australian Aborigines, Sub-Saharan or Central Africa, especially when this data was collected in the late 19th century, these were extremely isolated places. They had no contact with Westerners, and there was no way of there being any kind of quote-unquote pollution or diffusion of ideas amongst, let's say, Westerners and these people. So these are original beliefs of these human beings. All right. So there seems to be this alternative between humans from a tree, humans from clay. In fact, sometimes Witzel says they're actually both accepted, such that man is created from clay, but a woman is created from a tree or a tree stump, or vice versa. Man from a tree and woman from a clay, right? Now, in this sense, if we hearken back to the Bible, it can actually be a development of this, right? So, man from clay, but woman from rib. Now, Witzel points out this is actually not unique to the biblical account. That same mythology of man from clay, woman from rib is also found on the Andaman Islands. All right, there's really no way, again, to explain that. So that's an interesting correlation between the two. In Witzel's opinion, though, it seems that the main connection, probably the most archaic belief, is that humans originated from a tree. All right, we can kind of see the resemblance, right? If you look at man standing up in a posture, you can see the resemblance to a tree. The tree carries a lot of symbolism, a very focal point of many myths. The world tree, the tree of knowledge, the tree of good and evil. So we can see how this can serve as, the founding point for humanity. Now, interestingly enough, there's also a concept of a reservoir of souls, right? So in contemporary Catholic theology, the belief is that the soul is immediately created ex nihilo by God at the moment of conception, which is why Catholics are against abortion. But it seems the most archaic belief is that the soul actually predates the formation of the body, predates conception. That there is this reservoir of souls where the souls are, I guess you can say, housed prior to being unified to their bodily form. This is seen again in many parts of the world, and even today we have the concept of the concept of a stork delivering the baby to a family. Okay. The last point that we touch on is hubris. That after humanity was created, at some point they acted in hubris that offended the gods, perhaps the high god, and that this hubris led to death. Now, in many of the motifs, it's very common, interestingly enough, to find that the blame is laid on a woman. Some misdeed or mistake made by a woman that leads to the death, the entry of death into human life. Okay. Sometimes it's also connected to the Great Flood, which I'll be discussing in a separate video. Okay. But the interesting point is that the original, and again, perhaps the most archaic belief, is that humanity or humans did not die. Death was introduced into the world from, an original or archaic misdeed that was done. So when we're talking about all of this, the point is that we are now getting to the very origins of human beliefs. And Witzel proposes that these beliefs that I just discussed with you date back to before, okay, quite likely, reasonably date back to before humans even left Africa. So we're talking 70,000 years or older. All right, now there is a lot of evidence that humans can retain myths, especially when you compare Mesoamerican myth to Eurasian mythology. So, we can potentially go back even further, well within Africa, right? So these are so archaic that it's almost hard for us to get our minds wrapped around it. I know that there might be some skepticism about this, but I think there is a strong case to be made here. And everything that he touches upon is something that should really be reflected and thought over by anyone who is a serious student and someone who is serious about spirituality. Anyway, my friends, that's all for today. I wish you all a very nice week. Take care. Peace.